Well, thank you very much, James and Jojo. This really kind into inviting me. And as you said, I'm sort of swapping my neuromodulation hat to talk to you about quantitative digitography or QDG health, which is actually was some of the infrastructure. I developed this technology in my lab, which actually led to us discovering the brain and behavior signals that led to appropriate inputs for adaptive DBS, which could also have been on your 2025 slide that was FDA approved this year for clinical use. So that's been a wonderful thing to see that come from really early stages. We think that QDG Health is going to empower high-resolution metrics, will empower precise therapies, and improve access to neurological care. And one of the statements we've always had in the lab, which I think is really important for therapeutics, is if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. And for instance, in the gold rush, the people who actually made the money weren't the miners. They were the people who supplied the equipment, including our own Leland Stanford Jr. That's how he actually got his start in life. It's not advancing. Thank you. So in metabolic disorders like diabetes and kidney disease, we accurately monitor the disease with blood biomarkers. And as anybody who's in clinical medicine knows, that when we're on rounds, we talk about numbers all the time. However, in brain and musculoskeletal disorders, there are few ways to objectively measure behavior without being seen by an in-person healthcare provider. In fact, in cognitive impairment, where, as you know, there are lots of complicated rating scales, it's actually been shown that the objective measurement of movement, such as gait speed, is a better predictor of cognitive decline than the lengthy cognitive testing. In medical emergencies, such as falls, strokes, and concussion, people get rushed to the emergency room with clear motor and cognitive impairment, but doctors are left to subjective practices and scales to assess the severity of motor dysfunction. Across the healthcare management system, there's a critical unmet need for a validated disease monitoring system that can be used anywhere, by anyone, at any time, and the results are available in real time. Our solution is the QDG Health Comprehensive Disease Monitoring and Management System for Cognitive Motor Diseases. The foundation is quantitative digitography, or QDG technology, which provides objective, validated measures of cognitive motor science in real time. The person performs a simple 30-second test guided by the app on a phone or tablet on our little Kiduo device, which you're welcome to come and use later on. And then the data is transmitted to the QDG HIPAA compliant server and is analyzed by our AI-informed precise algorithm. The QDG metrics are transmitted in real time to the healthcare provider, and in Stanford, we've ported this into the electronic health record, who can also look at each measure over time and thereby make complex management decisions, managing people remotely and adjusting therapy remotely. In therapeutic trials, the high-precision metrics of QDG will streamline and reduce the cost of screening and outcome measures with remote testing, data storage, and management. QDG received breakthrough device designation. So QDG exists in a broad market. We have signal in most of these disorders, but our initial focus and validation is Parkinson's disease. And unfortunately, as you can see in many of these neurocognitive disorders, there are elements of Parkinsonism, including a very high risk in traumatic brain injury and concussion of Parkinsonism. So how does it work? Well, here you see a person pressing and releasing adjacent tensioned sensing levers in an alternating fashion on the Kiduo. Over on the right here, you can see the trace from a healthy control, and this is amplitude on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. And basically, this person performs very fast, full amplitude, high frequency, consistent alternating pressing and releasing. Unfortunately, at the lower trace, you see a very typical trace for a person with Parkinson's disease, where you see that they start off and they immediately lose amplitude, they get slower, and this is actually unique to Parkinson's, called the sequence effect, and leads to this freezing behavior, which is all correlated with freezing of gait, where we see the same effect. The simple task yields validated metrics of all the motor signs in Parkinson's disease, including bradykinesia, rigidity, tremor, gait impairment, and freezing of gait. And importantly, QDG metrics are significantly correlated not only with upper extremity scores, but also with lower extremity and axial items of the clinical rating scale, the MDS-UPDRS-3. Thus, QDG reflects the overall disease severity as well as the individual components. We have signal from the prodromal phase throughout the patient journey to over 20 years of disease duration, which was published this year in the Nature Parkinson's article as part of our remote clinical trial. So here are a couple of quotes from our collaborators from Bayer who are seeing that QDG technology may solve a solution for them in their trials and in their commercial device. So this is an example showing that when one is able to see and monitor a person's disease in between these rare in-person visits, it allows remote optimization of therapy. The metric tracked here is the overall mobility score, whose range is from 0 to 100, and higher is better, and anything over 92 is normal. This person was on the standard starting regimen of levodopa 3 times a day, and he was doing okay, but he was still falling, which was his major complaint. He complained, however, of feeling great one day and terrible another, despite taking the same doses of medication. And this is a very common complaint in people with Parkinson's that we as neurologists put down to absorption or what they've eaten or something. But as you see with the dashed line over here, the minute we added just an extra tablet of Cinemat to his 3 times a day regimen, his score immediately improved and became in the normal range, as shown by the green data points. But very importantly, his fluctuation became much less. And over this period of monitoring people, I've totally changed my understanding of this disease by seeing that fluctuation is a sign of undertreatment. We would never see this by just seeing them every 6 months. QDG is simple to use in the operating room or with any other brain stimulation system. And this example in the upper trace shows the trace performed in the OR off medication 20 minutes after we stopped propofol before we instrumented the patient. And here you can see this is actually a cognitive and motor impairment here because we'd done a test in the pre-op area off meds, and he was actually better than this. So it showed me that 20 minutes off propofol is actually not enough. Once we had the leads in and we turned on the DBS system, you see this beautiful improvement. And this way you can detect in the OR, in the focused ultrasound suite, in other areas, your immediate effect of therapy without really needing a human being. So this gains insight into the future of DBS programming, which will probably be done almost automatically and remotely using a smart algorithm and a remote system such as QDG. With the ever-increasing numbers of electrodes on DBS leads and the options of anodic or cathodic stimulation, the number of possible programming parameters far outstrip a clinician's ability to iterate and use our standard monopolar review. This is a collaboration we are doing with Boston Scientific's Illumina automated programming algorithm, where one uses the anatomy of the lead location to determine regions that the field should include, the ROIs, and regions to avoid. And Illumina will then tell you exactly what current to put on all of these electrodes on the lead and whether to use an anodic or cathodic device. This is an example of somebody who came in off meds, and of course, before DBS was activated, to the clinic. You can see that by these high-frequency strikes, there's a lot of tremor. We have an algorithm that basically analyzes these strikes and then takes them out of analyzing the mobility score. And underneath this, you may be able to appreciate how slowly this person was actually performing the task. The mobility score was extremely low. The tremor severity score was extremely high. One of our best programmers, this was her job of programming. She did a good job. This got better. The tremor severity score was lower, but this is what Illumina programmed. And as you can see, we resolved tremor and got a much better mobility score. So something like QDG can give immediate feedback and allow this type of programming to be iterated in real time and remotely. Can you help me again? So there's a lot of positive momentum in the health tech industry, and specifically the Parkinson's disease monitoring sector right now with Amada Health's IPO and PKG's Health's acquisition by Empatica, and more companies are launching with the strategy of using RPM codes. But so far, the available devices that have been FDA approved are good, but they're partial solutions. This is the standard, the gold standard, which is an in-person and rather subjective and long clinical rating scale. And only QDG can match this by having validated metrics of all the motor signs, which can be done in real time, remotely and objectively. So we really have the clinical rating scale that now can be done by anywhere, anytime, and in any place. So once FDA cleared, which we will have initiate clinical revenue using the remote therapy monitoring codes, for which we are a good fit. And this is the projected revenue for Parkinson's disease and TBI. I did hear that our remote monitoring codes didn't get such a good call out, but I have to say that right now there's nothing. And the CMS is really invested in neurologists and PCPs using remote monitoring codes. And so for FY26, these codes are becoming easier to use, shorter times, better communication codes. And as we go forward and we use these for more complex systems like QDG, the revenue will go up. And what this is actually, this is additional revenue. So if you're a neurologist, you basically get $750 a year using the longest time code for a revisit to manage your person with Parkinson's disease. If you can use a system in between those visits using these remote codes, you stand to make another $2,000 a year. So this is maybe small right now, but this means a lot to a provider. With clinical trials, we already are working on clinical revenue prior to FDA approval. And now we're working with the TAP program to develop our own codes, which will be necessary to use in the emergency room, the clinics, and the hospitals in a more of a point of care system. So currently we are seeking our seed raise. As you can see in the gray areas, this is where we've got to. We've got breakthrough designation. We're working with the TAP program. We've pretty well cleared it with them. Oops, sorry. That we are going through a pretty straightforward 510K. We're just finishing up now with our mass manufacturing and building our software system outside of Stanford. We're working on the license transfer with Stanford right now. We've had several clinical trials, and we're validating the system at Stanford. And now we're working under IRB. We can actually monitor people states, and we're using that as a way, and with clinical trials, to engage our KOLs, so that as we get clearance, we will then implement this in a strategic fashion through California and then through the other states. And I will end there just showing you our small but mighty team. And we'd love to hear from you at hello@qdghealth.com, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Great presentation. Do we have any questions for Helen? Anyone? Here we go.
Hi, Kristen Mittal, co-founder and CEO of Mittal Consulting. Great presentation. My question for you is, you said you're in the TAP program. I'm curious, what's been your experience so far with them?
Oh, great. Except the FDA is having trouble right now, obviously. But the TAP program, Laura Gottschalk is our person our liaison, and we meet every month. I wrote a pre-sub back in the early part of the summer to get requests for written feedback as far as our regulatory path. And it did take them about 2 months to get back to us. And that was partly because they'd sort of shifted teams. So we kind of had to go back to the beginning with a new FDA team. But we've met with several consultants through TAP for both reimbursement, beginning to look at how to start our own codes. So they cover the full span. And it's really, I think, what you make of it. Our focus now with some of the investors we're talking to is really FDA. So for this next period of time, we're going to focus on FDA, and they are helping us by giving us, so they can't tell us what to do, and of course everything could change, but we're working with John Doucette at Micra, so we have a pretty clear idea, and it's a fairly low risk pathway. So they've been really helpful in helping us with that.
Great. Okay, one more question for Helen.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on the structure of the relationships you have with strategics right now and what you hope to get out of those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get lots of advice that's very different. My goal, and this could be challenged, my goal spinning out of a university we basically have 25 years of data in this, is to seed as much as I can in the university setting. And so that includes talking to pharma and device companies. I already have relationships, obviously, with them, and doing the clinical studies necessary to solve a problem. For instance, remote programming. We are talking to, these may lead to strategics, but we also are not sure that we want to be an exclusive strategic yet. It's too early. So I think that's the balance, is talking to strategics. And then, because this can be used by anyone, and any device company, any pharma company, any brain stimulation company, for many different disorders. So we don't really want to pigeon ourselves too far. I really didn't want at the beginning, I'm a neophyte in the business world, obviously, but I didn't want to be bought by a major company and stuck on the shelf. When I've had some students who've come up with technologies to present to me, and actually when I was doing my own patent search, I saw one of these on a large company's shelf and I knew it would never get anywhere, and I felt very bad for that. So we don't want to do that.